I still remember the exact moment I realized something was off, though at the time I had no idea just how deep the fissure ran. It was late afternoon in Dallas, the sky a molten orange that bled into the horizon, and I was sitting on the porch of our modest brick house with a Bud Light sweating in my hand, half watching the kids ride their bikes down the cul-de-sac. Everything looked normal. Our neighbors were mowing their lawns, the distant roar of a pickup truck echoed down the street, and my wife, Emily, was supposed to be returning from her girls' trip any minute now. That's when I heard it, the soft, almost imperceptible gasp as she stepped onto the porch, her eyes wide, her hand instinctively cradling her stomach. I froze, sensing in that single heartbeat that the world as I knew it was about to change. The look on her face wasn't excitement, it wasn't joy, it was fear, raw, unfiltered fear. And in that instant, a memory I had pushed down for months resurfaced, like a bad channel flicking back on the TV. The way she had texted less, laughed more nervously, brushed past me in the kitchen, avoiding my eyes. Small things. Innocuous, maybe, if I'd been a fool, but I wasn't, not anymore. Before I can explain how we got here, I need to take you back to the beginning, to the day I met Emily. I was 29, living in Austin, working at a small architecture firm downtown. I was the guy who wore plaid shirts even in the summer, who could drink 3 cups of black coffee before breakfast and still feel nothing. She walked into the diner on Congress Avenue, the one with the vinyl booths and the smell of frying bacon that could make a grown man cry. She was laughing at something on her phone, her hair tucked behind one ear, and the way she smiled at the waitress when she ordered eggs over easy. It was a small gesture, but I remember thinking she's kind to everyone she meets. We started talking. Small talk at first. Music, Austin traffic, the absurdity of trying to find parking near the Capitol. Then came the real talk. Dreams, fears, the kind of confessions you don't share with strangers. I told her I hated the way my brother's old truck rattled, and she told me she'd always wanted to live in a house with a porch swing and a dog that doesn't bite. By the end of that meal, I was completely hooked, and somehow so was she. From Austin, we moved together to Dallas. The first road trip we took was a 6-hour drive to Galveston, windows down, country music blasting, laughing until my stomach hurt. We camped on the beach, built sandcastles, argued over whether Bud Light or Shiner Bock was the superior beer, and Emily eventually fell asleep on my shoulder as the waves whispered against the shore. Those were the days when everything felt effortless, when love felt like the air you breathe, necessary, natural, unremarkable in its perfection. Marriage came next, then a modest house with a white picket fence, and eventually 2 kids who could outscream each other at any given moment. Life had a rhythm, predictable yet comforting. Friday night football games at the local high school, Saturday morning pancake breakfasts, BBQ cookouts with neighbors who called us the happy couple. It all seemed perfect. And maybe that's why the betrayal cut so deep. Because in that perfection, I never imagined shadows could creep in. Not here, not now. Emily's trip had been framed as a simple getaway with her closest friends, an annual tradition she'd never missed since college. Girls' trip, she said, eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, voice light and teasing. You'll survive without me for a few days, won't you? I laughed, kissed her forehead, and waved her off at the airport, imagining her in a sundress, flip-flops tapping against the terminal floor, the scent of coconut sunscreen trailing behind her. That was on a Monday morning. By Thursday, something had shifted. My gut tightened each time I checked my phone. She'd been sending photos, sand, cocktails, sunsets, but I noticed small inconsistencies. In one shot, a hotel keycard with a name I didn't recognize. In another, the reflection of a man standing behind her, half hidden but unmistakably broad-shouldered, someone who wasn't part of her friend group. I tried to dismiss it. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I'd simply been spending too many late nights at the office, reading too many crime stories, letting paranoia eat at me like a slow flame. Still, the instinct gnawed at me. I began piecing together the anomalies, late-night texts she said were work emails, sudden shopping sprees she couldn't explain, whispered phone calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. It was subtle, these little cracks in our facade, but my brain could feel the structural damage. And then came the text from her friend, not from Emily herself, saying, "Hey, are you sure he's not going to notice?" That one line, innocuous on the surface, set my blood cold. I tried not to think about it as I went through the motions of the day. Picked the kids up from school, helped with homework, tried to focus on a presentation I had to give at work. But every laugh track in the background of my life, the kids playing, the neighbor's dog barking, the television in the living room, felt like a cruel echo, reminding me that something was horribly wrong. And then she returned. That afternoon, her car rolled up the driveway, sun-bleached hair falling over her shoulders, sunglasses perched on her nose. She stepped out with a lightness in her step, but the moment our eyes met, it was like the air in the universe shifted. I saw it immediately. The way her hands instinctively went to her stomach, the slight falter in her voice when she greeted the kids. And then, the thing that made me stumble backward in disbelief, the faint outline of a man's shoulder behind her reflection in the window. I didn't ask, I didn't move. I just watched as Emily stepped onto the porch, silent, face pale, lips pressed together as if trying to hold back a confession she didn't know how to deliver. Her friends had left her at the airport, gone already, back to their own lives. And there she was, alone, yet somehow not alone. I remember the words I said next, though they left my mouth dry. "Emily, what happened?" She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze flickered toward me, then toward the kids, then back. And in that heartbeat, I understood everything. The joy, the trips, the dinners, the laughs. It had been a veneer, paper thin, covering something I hadn't even imagined existed. My closest friend, the guy I had trusted more than my own blood, the one who had been there when I got promoted, when my car broke down, when I barely had a dime to my name, he was the one behind this. Her frightened expression said it all. The guilt, the shame, the fear of losing everything, it radiated from her like heat off asphalt. She opened her mouth to speak, and the first syllable was swallowed by the wind, leaving only a tremor in her voice. I didn't move. The kids, oblivious, ran past us, chasing a stray soccer ball, their laughter piercing the tension like glass shattering softly. That's when I realized the truth, the part that made my stomach knot in knots so tight I thought I might vomit right there on the porch. Emily wasn't just hiding something, she was carrying it. And it wasn't just a secret she could confess with a tearful apology. It was a reality that had already begun shaping itself in the contours of her body, a life that belonged to another man, my best friend, my betrayal, my nightmare made flesh. I wanted to ask questions. I wanted to scream, to break something, to demand answers. But there was no point. The look on her face, frightened, regretful, cornered, said more than words ever could. And in that silence, I understood that the next days, weeks, months, would be a minefield of lies, confrontations, and evidence I wasn't sure I wanted to see, but knew I had to. I took a deep breath, set my beer down on the railing, and let the moment stretch. It was a stillness pregnant with dread, the kind you read about in novels, but never think you'll live. And then Emily spoke. Her voice, barely above a whisper, trembled with the weight of her confession, though she didn't say the words I knew were coming. I didn't know how to tell you," she said. That's when I realized this wasn't going to be like the movies. There would be no dramatic showdown, no one sweeping in to rescue me from heartbreak. The truth was mine to face, and I would have to collect the fragments of my shattered trust and make sense of a life I thought I knew. I still remember the last thing I saw before she went inside to make herself comfortable and wait for my reaction. The reflection of her in the sliding glass door, one hand on her stomach, the other pressed against the glass as if trying to hold herself together. And just behind her, I thought I glimpsed a shadow that wasn't hers, a shape I knew too well, a memory of laughter and trust now twisted into betrayal. I didn't speak, I didn't move, I just watched, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that nothing in my life would ever feel normal again. And so, it began. The next morning, I woke up before the kids, the sunlight slicing through the blinds and painting the hardwood floors in gold. My stomach ached, not from hunger, but from anticipation, from the kind of dread that sits heavy on your chest and refuses to move. Emily was still in the bedroom, the door closed, the faint sound of her phone vibrating somewhere on the nightstand. I didn't knock. I didn't ask for answers. I had decided, silently, that I would find them myself. I started small. Checking the trash was the first instinct, discreetly, almost methodically. Coffee cups, napkins, receipts, nothing suspicious. But then came the hotel key card, tucked in the pocket of her overnight bag. It wasn't hers. Not the name, not the design, not the subtle wear that indicated someone else had used it extensively. My heart thumped in my ears as I held it, the edges of the card sharp against my fingers. Next came the texts. Emily thought I didn't know how to sync iMessages across devices. I didn't correct her. I just opened my laptop late that night and scrolled through the conversation thread she thought she had deleted. There it was, flirtatious emojis, inside jokes, references to late-night meetups in cities I had never been to, with her girls. The person she was texting wasn't a friend, not by a long shot. It was him, my best friend, the one who had been at my bachelor party, who had drunk too much beer at every cookout, who had borrowed my tools and my truck without asking. His name in her phone was subtle, almost too casual. M, that's it. Just M. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours, trying to reconcile the words with the image of the woman I had loved, married, and trusted with every fiber of my being. But there was no reconciliation, only evidence, only cold, unshakable proof. I started to dig further, quietly. The credit card statements revealed overnight charges in hotels across the state, dates that conveniently coincided with her girls' trip, gas receipts, parking tickets, random coffees purchased in towns she'd never mentioned. I printed everything, organizing it into folders, highlighting each transaction with a red marker, labeling each one, date, location, evidence of affair. I wasn't just collecting proof. I was building a case. I set up a camera in the living room, one that I thought she'd never notice. It wasn't for the kids, they were downstairs playing. It was for me, to see the truth in motion. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I also knew instinctively that the truth had a way of revealing itself when you least expected it. And reveal itself it did. That evening, as she walked past the sliding glass door to retrieve the mail, I saw it, her reflection, yes, but something else in the shadow behind her. A fleeting shape, a shoulder too broad, a hand brushing against hers. My fingers gripped the railing until my knuckles whitened. I felt sick, dizzy, angry, and heartbroken all at once. The next day, I received a letter slipped under the front door. No return address, just a single sheet of lined paper folded neatly in thirds. I unfolded it carefully, almost afraid to read. You know, he's the one she really wanted. Don't bother looking for answers from her. Anonymous. That was the final nudge I needed. I couldn't ignore it. I needed proof beyond the receipts, beyond the keycards, beyond my intuition. I needed the undeniable confirmation, the thing that would strip away the lies entirely. I ordered a DNA test kit online. I had it delivered to my office, addressed to me, discreet and unremarkable. I didn't know yet how I would confront her, or if I had the courage to see the result, but I knew I needed it. While waiting for the kit, I became a ghost in my own house. I watched her, noting every little movement, every glance, every hesitation. She was trying so hard to act normal, to preserve the illusion of routine. Breakfast with the kids, coffee on the porch, folding laundry. The motions were there, but the warmth was gone. She flinched when I looked at her directly, smiled too brightly at the wrong moments, and laughed at jokes she clearly didn't find funny. The tension was almost palpable, like electricity before a storm. One night, I stayed up late, going through old photos on our shared cloud storage. There were hundreds of pictures, but one in particular caught my eye. A selfie she had taken at the hotel, the reflection of a man in the background perfectly clear. I zoomed in, the pixelation doing nothing to hide the broad shoulders, the familiar messy hair, the sly half smile. My hands shook as I scrolled through more photos, each one worse than the last, each one a hammer pounding against my trust. I tried to rationalize, of course. Maybe it's not what it looks like. Maybe it's just a friend. Maybe I'm imagining things. But the evidence was overwhelming. Credit card receipts, hotel key cards, iMessages, photographs, anonymous letters. It all pointed in the same direction, a single line connecting betrayal to action. Then came the medical report. She had gone to the doctor shortly after returning from her trip, something she told me she wanted to do for routine care. The ultrasound images were sitting in the mail pile on the kitchen counter. At first, I thought it was just a follow-up, an ordinary medical note, but my heart stopped when I noticed the date on the paperwork. It coincided perfectly with the timeline of her trip, and there it was, in black and white. A small heartbeat, a new life forming. The question, the sickening, unavoidable question, hit me like a punch in the gut. Whose life was it? Who was the father? My mind reeled as I placed the DNA test kit on the counter next to the ultrasound image, the irony bitter in my mouth. The two items, one a promise of scientific certainty, the other a haunting confirmation of conception, sat side by side, mocking me. I started compiling a folder on my laptop labeled Emily and M, a digital archive of every misstep, every evidence point, every lie. Texts, emails, receipts, photos, letters, and even a map showing the locations of every suspicious trip. Each click, each drag and drop made my stomach turn, but I couldn't stop. It was like watching a train wreck in slow motion. You can look away, but you know what's coming, and the impact is unavoidable. By the end of the week, I had enough. Enough evidence that no rational person could deny the truth. My friend, the one I had trusted more than my own family, had been in my life as a companion, a godfather to my kids, a partner in mischief, while secretly taking everything I held dear. Emily, the woman I had loved, the mother of my children, had carried this secret, playing a role in a life that was mine and yet not mine anymore. The day the DNA test arrived, I felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. I carried it upstairs to my office, unopened, hands trembling. I couldn't bring myself to confront her yet. I had to be sure, had to have the hard evidence before words left my mouth. I assembled the kit, followed the instructions with meticulous care, and waited for the samples to be collected and sent off. While waiting for the results, I kept a notebook, jotting down every suspicious behavior, every lie I suspected, every fleeting glance and awkward smile. It was my map, my way to navigate the chaos that had replaced the life I thought I knew. And as I wrote, the anger simmered, not loud or explosive, but quiet and relentless, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Then, one afternoon, the tipping point came. I was in the garage, moving boxes to find a tool for a home project, when I noticed something sticking out from a pile of Emily's travel bags. A receipt, folded and crumpled, with the unmistakable name of a high-end boutique she had visited during her trip. The date matched the night I had seen that shadow in her reflection. My stomach sank. I realized then that the trail of breadcrumbs wasn't just leading me somewhere. It had already arrived. The truth was here, in my hands, undeniable. And in that instant, I knew that there would be no turning back. I had gone from suspicion to evidence, from intuition to proof, and the confrontation that awaited would not be easy. Emily would have to answer for her actions. And the world I thought I lived in, the safe, comfortable, familiar life, was gone. I closed my notebook, stacked the evidence neatly on my desk, and sat back. The silence of the house felt oppressive, almost alive. The kids played upstairs, oblivious to the storm gathering just beyond their innocent laughter. I could hear Emily humming faintly from the kitchen, a sound I had once found comforting. Now it was hollow, a reminder that nothing was as it seemed. The next step was clear, the DNA test results, the final confirmation. And when that envelope arrived, I would have everything I needed to confront her, to expose the truth in a way that couldn't be denied. And so, I waited, tense, vigilant, and silently furious, knowing that the moment of reckoning was approaching, because sometimes evidence isn't just proof, it's a weapon, and I was ready to wield it. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, just as I was pouring my third cup of black coffee. I could feel the weight of it, even through the plain manila. No return address, no hint of its contents, just the promise of finality. I carried it upstairs to the office, my hands steady despite the storm raging in my chest. The kids were at school, Emily had left for work, and for the first time in days, the house was mine alone, a quiet stage for the climax I had been preparing for. I opened it with a calm I didn't feel. 2 pieces of paper slipped out. One was the DNA test results, the other a letter from the lab confirming chain of custody and authenticity. My eyes skimmed the words, my throat dry. Then I saw it. The numbers didn't lie. The child she was carrying wasn't mine, it was M's. I sat there for a long moment, the silence pressing against my ears. The rage that had been simmering in me boiled over into a cold, calculated focus. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't just a private betrayal anymore. This was public, undeniable, and I was going to make sure everyone who mattered knew the truth. I called Emily. She answered on the first ring, cheerful, unaware, and I felt the first pangs of satisfaction. "Hey," she said, "what's up?" "Emily," I said, voice calm but sharp, "we need to talk, right now, at the diner, the one on Main Street, noon." There was a pause. I could almost hear her swallowing. Okay, she said finally, her tone wary. I hung up, took a deep breath, and started gathering the evidence. Receipts, iMessages, photos, the hotel key card, the DNA results, all neatly organized in a folder I could carry. Everything I had collected, everything that would strip away her lies, I was taking with me. By the time I arrived at the diner, I saw her sitting in our usual booth, nervously twisting her ring. The place was busy, lunch hour, and the hum of conversation gave me the kind of audience I wanted. Not the whole diner necessarily, but witnesses enough that there would be no plausible deniability. I slid into the booth opposite her, setting the folder down so it was clearly visible. Her eyes flicked to it, widened, then darted away. "I guess you know why I asked you here," I said evenly. I don't," she started, but I cut her off. "No, Emily, you don't get to talk yet. You get to look. You get to remember everything." I opened the folder, pulling out the receipts first. Gas stations, hotels, boutiques, every transaction labeled, every date matching the nights she had girls' trips. I watched her face as she realized the depth of my awareness, the painstaking attention I had paid to every detail. "You followed me?" she whispered, but there was no accusation, no denial, just the faintest tremor in her voice. "I observed," I corrected, holding her gaze. "I didn't follow. I didn't need to. You left a trail, Emily, one that's impossible to ignore." Next, I pulled out the printed iMessages, each conversation highlighted, inside jokes, emojis, plans she had tried to hide. She leaned back, her hand covering her mouth, as if trying to stop herself from speaking. "And then there's this," I said, pulling the DNA test result from the folder and setting it in front of her. I didn't have to guess. Science doesn't lie. Her eyes went wide, panic rising like a tide. You did this?" "I did," I said simply. I confirmed what I already knew. Emily opened her mouth, but no words came out. Around us, diners glanced at our booth, drawn by the intensity of the exchange. I could feel their attention, the way the world seemed to contract around our table. "Do you understand what this means?" I asked, my voice low but deadly calm. "This isn't a mistake. This isn't a misunderstanding. You betrayed me. You betrayed our family. And now, the truth is here for everyone to see." She tried to laugh, a hollow, desperate sound. It's not what you think." "Oh, it's exactly what I think," I interrupted, slamming a receipt and the hotel keycard down for emphasis. "Every late night, every hidden text, every lie, it all points to the same conclusion. And this," I tapped the DNA results, "confirms it." Her face went pale, the kind of pale that washes away makeup and pretense. I saw her lips quiver, the way her hands fidgeted. She was caught, and she knew it. I had arranged for witnesses, my lawyer, discreetly sitting in the corner, the diner's waitress who had served us for years, even a friend who had come along under the guise of a casual lunch. They all saw, and would remember. "Emily," I said, leaning in, "this isn't just about us anymore. The world sees now, and they know exactly who you are, who you really are." Her voice cracked. "Please, don't." "I already have," I said. "You can't erase what's been done, and you can't hide anymore. Not from me, not from anyone who matters." The waiter set down our food, burgers and fries, but neither of us touched them. The clatter of plates, the murmur of conversation, everything became background noise to the electric tension in the booth. "You think you can just expose me?" she demanded, finally finding her voice, the panic edging into anger. You're insane." "I'm sane," I said. "I'm precise. I'm deliberate. I'm not insane. You are. You're the one who thought a decade of trust could be tossed aside like it meant nothing. You're the one who believed you could carry a secret that impacts everyone around you and still sleep at night." She looked around, realizing that diners were now watching. Some whispered, others pretended not to notice, but the damage was done. She was humiliated, and the public exposure was more effective than any private confrontation could have been. Her words faltered. "You've had years to think about this," I said, voice icy. "I've had days. And now, it's time for consequences." The door of the diner opened, and M walked in, oblivious at first. Then his eyes landed on us. The recognition was instantaneous. A flicker of fear, then shock, then something else. Guilt, perhaps. I gestured subtly to him, and he froze, realization dawning. "This is him," I said, my voice carrying enough that even those at neighboring booths could hear. "The man you betrayed me with. The father of the child you tried to hide from me. Look at him, Emily. Look at him and know that the truth doesn't disappear just because you hope it will." M's face went pale. He tried to speak, but I cut him off, Save it, both of you. No lies, no excuses. The evidence doesn't lie. Your actions are public. Your betrayal is visible. And the consequences, oh, the consequences are just beginning. I leaned back, the folder neatly stacked in front of me, my eyes flicking to the waitress, the lawyer, my friend. They were witnesses to the unraveling of deceit, the moment when trust shattered into 1,000 pieces. Emily's face twisted, her voice barely a whisper. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said. I understand the kind of people you are, and I understand the life you've tried to hide from me. But I also understand one more thing: justice. Not the kind that comes from the law necessarily, but the kind that comes from truth, the kind that can't be ignored. She slumped into the booth, silent now, defeated. Em stood frozen, caught in the glare of exposure. The diner had returned to its normal rhythm around us, but inside that booth, time had stopped. I reached for my phone and hit record, not for social media, not for revenge, but to document, to have a record of this moment, the undeniable proof of betrayal, for when words might fail, for when memories might be twisted. Emily glanced at the phone, panic rising again. You wouldn't... I already am, I said, calm, collected, unflinching. Everyone deserves to know the truth, and now they will. You wanted secrecy, but the truth doesn't need permission to exist. The sound of a chair scraping sharply against the floor made me glance up. A diner at the next table had stood, eyes wide, phone in hand. Another murmur rippled through the room. The public reveal was complete. The humiliation wasn't just private anymore, it was witnessed, undeniable. And as Emily's frightened face turned toward me, pleading silently, I realized that the reckoning I had prepared for, the confrontation I had visualized 1,000 times, had finally arrived. The gavel hadn't fallen yet, but the judgment was already clear. The evidence, the witnesses, the DNA, it all pointed to one inescapable conclusion. She had betrayed me, and the world knew it. The booth fell silent except for her shaky breaths, the faint hum of the diner, and my own heartbeat. Outside, the wind rattled the awning, a subtle reminder that life continues, even when trust is shattered. I closed the folder, slid it toward her, and whispered, "This is your reality now. Face it." Her eyes welled with tears. Em finally moved, but there was no confrontation, no denial, just recognition. Recognition that the secret they thought would stay buried had exploded into public truth. And in that moment, as I looked around the diner, I knew something else. The next chapter was coming, the aftermath, the fallout, the healing. But for now, the confrontation had been won. The truth was out, and Emily's frightened face said it all. The waitress returned, asking if we wanted anything else, and I shook my head. Silence had replaced appetite. Outside, the traffic moved, oblivious to the storm that had erupted inside the diner. But inside, one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same. And as I slipped out, leaving them to absorb the reality, I felt a calm I hadn't known in weeks. The confrontation was over. The world had seen the truth. Now it was time for the next step. The house was quiet when I returned. The echoes of the diner, of Emily's terrified face, of Em frozen in shock, still lingered in my mind. But outside, life continued as usual. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the familiar smell of our living room, the faint scent of lemon cleaner mixed with leftover coffee from the morning. For the first time in weeks, I felt a strange lightness. Not relief exactly, but clarity. The chaos was over. The confrontation had been executed, the truth laid bare, and the world, those who mattered, knew what had happened. The kids ran up to me before I could even set my briefcase down. Their faces were bright, innocent, unknowing of the adult drama that had just unraveled. I scooped them up, lifted them onto my shoulders, and laughed, a deep belly laugh that hadn't come naturally in months. The sound startled even me. It was as if the tension of betrayal had been lodged somewhere inside my chest, waiting for permission to release. The weeks that followed were structured, methodical. I had already initiated the divorce proceedings, ensuring the legal aspects were handled professionally. Assets were divided fairly, though Emily's attempt to manipulate would-be sympathy from lawyers and friends only underscored the audacity of her behavior. I documented everything meticulously: the evidence, the confrontations, the witnesses' statements. When the courts reviewed the files, there was no room for doubt. She had betrayed our marriage. The custody of the children was straightforward. The courts granted me primary custody, which allowed me to maintain stability for the kids, and the financial settlements were reasonable, ensuring that while she had made catastrophic personal errors, they wouldn't destabilize our lives further. But legal victory, I quickly realized, was only part of the process. Healing was more subtle, more personal. I began with routines that anchored me. Sunday morning pancakes with the kids, the smell of syrup and sizzling butter, grounding us in the comfort of tradition. A Bud Light on the front porch at dusk. The soft hum of the neighborhood crickets and distant lawnmowers reminding me of the ordinary world still moving forward. Evenings spent watching ESPN with the kids sprawled on the couch. Debates about football stats and the occasional playful trash talk cutting through lingering tension. These were not grand gestures of recovery, they were the small, steady bricks of reclaiming life, of rebuilding normalcy. I allowed myself moments of reflection, sometimes late at night, when the house was still and the city lights twinkled through the blinds. I thought of Emily's terrified, guilt-ridden face and M's stunned expression. I thought of the years lost to lies, the evenings I had spent wondering what had been true and what had been manipulated. And I realized something crucial. Revenge had been tempting, but it wouldn't have brought peace. The true power was in exposure, in clarity, and in choosing my own path forward. The children, blissfully unaware of the intricacies of betrayal, taught me lessons of resilience without words. Their crayon drawings left scattered on the dining table, depicting family scenes in bold strokes and vibrant colors, reminded me that life continues regardless of adult mistakes. I framed a few of them, a helicopter here, a house there, stick figures holding hands, and placed them in the living room. Each drawing became a small monument to innocence, a reminder that what mattered most was the love that remained untarnished by deceit. Friends and family rallied around me, quietly offering support without judgment. They became part of the healing process, not through pity, but through shared laughter, camaraderie, and the simple act of being present. A barbecue in the backyard, the scent of grilled steaks and burgers mingling with the late summer air, became a ritual of reclaiming joy. We toasted the small victories, a week of stability, a soccer game won, a school project completed. In these moments, I felt life slowly knitting itself back together. There were still reminders of what had happened. Social media occasionally reminded me that Emily's betrayal was public knowledge, with whispers and commentary from mutual acquaintances. At first, these nudged at the old wounds, but over time, they became inconsequential background noise, white static to the new soundtrack of our lives. I realized that the exposure, the confrontation, and the meticulous documentation of truth had rendered vengeance unnecessary. The truth had been loud enough. I didn't have to participate in the spectacle of gossip. Peace, I discovered, was far more potent than rage. I also returned to small personal rituals that had been neglected. Early morning runs along the familiar bike trails, the rhythmic pounding of my sneakers against asphalt clearing my mind. Saturday morning coffee at the corner diner, where the waitress still smiled knowingly. Evenings reading with a light on beside the bed, flipping through stories that transported me from betrayal to redemption in parallel narratives. Each act was ordinary, mundane, but profoundly restorative. They were acts of reclaiming myself. Months passed. Emily's presence receded, legally and physically. The child she carried, a constant reminder of the betrayal, was now under arrangements that limited her influence over our daily lives. M, as expected, faded from view. Both became specters of a past chapter, shadows in the bright rooms of my new reality. The world, once a stage for exposure and humiliation, became quiet again, ordinary, and forgiving in its indifference. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching the sunset bleed orange and pink over the rooftops, the kids chasing each other around the yard, I raised my Bud Light in a quiet toast to the sky. Sometimes, I said aloud, more to myself than anyone else, the trash takes itself out. A grin spread across my face, unforced, free. The absurdity of life's twists, the poetic justice of truth, and the simple, unshakable reality of family anchored me in a way revenge never could. In the weeks that followed, I noticed subtle changes in myself. I laughed more freely, I slept more soundly, I engaged with the world without the constant gnawing suspicion that had consumed me for months. I learned that healing wasn't linear. Some days the old anger would flicker like a candle in wind, but it never blew me off course. I had learned to steer by the compass of truth and personal integrity, and nothing, not even the deepest betrayal, could knock me off course again. At dinner one night, as the kids recounted their day's adventures, I found myself smiling genuinely at their antics. A spilled cup of juice, a scuffed knee, a triumphant report card. They were victories, minor and mundane, yet monumental in their affirmation of life going forward. Emily's shadow, once so large in my psyche, had diminished to a memory, as if it had never truly had the power I once feared. And so, the home that had been the site of whispered secrets and broken trust became a sanctuary again. The front porch, where I sipped my Bud Light, the living room, filled with crayon drawings and laughter, and the backyard, fragrant with barbecue and summer evenings, all bore witness to resilience. Life, I realized, was less about the betrayals we suffer and more about the peace we choose to reclaim afterward. Sometimes, when the night is quiet and the kids are asleep, I look back on the journey, not with bitterness, not with longing, but with a measured acknowledgement of survival. Betrayal had entered my life like a storm, fierce and unrelenting. Yet the aftermath, healing, rebuilding, reclaiming, proved to be even more powerful. In the end, it wasn't the exposure or the confrontation that defined me, but the quiet resilience of returning to ordinary moments and finding extraordinary strength in them. I finally understood that closure didn't always come with fireworks or dramatic declarations. Often it came in the soft rustle of morning newspapers, the smell of pancakes on a Sunday, the sound of kids laughing in the backyard, and the simple defiant act of raising a Bud Light in the fading sunlight. Life moved on. The debris of betrayal swept aside, and in that continuity, I found something I had been searching for all along: peace. Because at the end of the day, justice may be served, secrets may be exposed, and betrayals may be confronted, but life and ordinary happiness waits for no one. And sometimes, the best revenge is the life you build, in spite of the people who tried to destroy it.